on Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Cool. Well, sorry. Morning, everybody. That took me a little bit by surprise. It's Sunday again, and you're with us on Teacher Talk Radio Points of View. Today, we're looking at, an oldie but a goodie, essentially, in terms of big issues facing teaching. We're looking at teacher burnout. So teachers are exhausted, overwhelmed, and in many cases, leaving the profession. And we're just going to be chatting about that and if there's anything practical that can be done to stop this. So just to sort of kick us off, I looked up some statistics just around this issue just before we started. So around 40,000 teachers quit the state-funded sector every year. Approximately 1 in 10 teachers leave after their first year, and roughly 1/3, so about 33%, quit within 5 years. This is a very high attrition rate. In comparison, what interested me with all of these statistics is in comparison with other countries, that is very, very high. So if you, the UK or England is, I don't know about Australia, but definitely the worst country in Europe when it comes to this issue. And, a lot of things has been listed why that's happening and what might be done to stop it. But obviously, it's a massive concern. Oh, I should say also, it is higher in core subjects. So maths, English, like the subjects that all students do where you need the most teachers. So the core subjects have the worst attrition rates. So that's what we're discussing today and why that might be the case and what's happening. We've had a lot of comments already through on this. So we're interested in hearing people's views as it comes through. But who wants to kick us off? Lucy, what are your thoughts?
It's always me. I knew it. I was just writing some notes as well. Well, so my thoughts on this, I often say this, I come at this from a different perspective because I wasn't a qualified teacher. So I did teach, I led groups through maths intervention. They were never full classes, but I did do a lot of work covering full classes. And I had the best of both worlds because I took some of the most difficult children, students, or students who needed the most help, etc. I was always able to build a relationship with those students because of those smaller groups. I was able to identify issues more quickly because I had fewer people. I was able to, in some ways, achieve more as a result because I didn't have 30 other students when one student was having an issue or a problem or needed help. And it was always my intention to train as a teacher. In fact, it's been my intention to become a teacher since I did my work experience at school. Things went differently for me. I did different things. I joined the Navy instead of university, things like that. But it was always my intention one day to go into it. And so I took a sort of a steady route as an HLTA in a secondary school leading maths intervention, and very quickly realised that although I was paid a significant amount less than any of my teaching colleagues, I felt a reasonable deal in terms of work-life balance. And I was always intending to train, but every year my classroom had a little office on the back of it, and that was where the graduate teacher trainees were based if they weren't in classes. And every year I got to know them really well. And I had people coming through who were, who'd been project managers, who'd been scientists, all kinds of things. And all of them would say, this is the most stressful thing. I wish I hadn't done it. There was one single GTP who came through, who was ex-army, who loved it, was on top of everything, absolutely amazing. He was the only person I ever saw who didn't find it stressful at all, and that was just his personality, his training, the things, his own unique sort of personality. But for most of them, many regretted going into it, and many ended that year with a sort of caveat of, I'm going to see how it goes. Once I'm teaching, maybe things will drop off and it will become easier. But I always knew it wouldn't, because I was watching my colleagues who were struggling under a weight of work. I mean, I always felt my pay would, I can't remember what the pay, but say if my pay doubled, my workload would minimal treble. And, people, it's the day-to-day stuff that all of us have to do. After a lesson, you've got 2 minutes before the next class come in, but you've got to send that email about the child who you're concerned about or that there's an issue with. And then, it's all of those little things that mean that you can't get everything done. And at the end of the day, you've got loads of things in your head that you can't do because you've had so many different experiences during that day. That's before you get the CPD, can you make sure that you've all looked at, you've all got to remember this, you're safeguarding and all of those things. Before all of those things come in, your lesson planning, somebody's going to come and observe your lesson tomorrow, so you need to make sure it's just, I can understand why teachers leave, and I could very much understand why I decided in the end that training as a teacher wasn't something I wanted to do, because I wanted a work-life balance.
It makes me wonder why it's a distinctly English or British thing. I was just looking at another stat here. It says the UK is one of the few developed countries where teachers primarily leave, due to basically burnout as opposed to retirement. So in places like Italy and France, teachers primarily will leave the profession. You don't think so, Maud? I'm just looking at the stats. You think it's not distinctly English?
I think it's getting worse in France as well. And I'm in touch with German teachers, and they told me that they were also suffering from an avalanche of tasks. There's no attendance officers in Germany, by the way, so they have to do all the admin. And I think most of them, whether they're French, German, or British teachers or English teachers, are complaining about more and more children with special educational needs, complex needs, big classroom sizes, and less support and more budget cuts. So I think it's just a tightening of the system as a whole, and we bear the brunt as teachers. But remember, in France, we've had several cases, highly publicized cases. A film has been made recently, and it was at the Festival de Cannes, about a teacher who was murdered, assassinated outside school. So teachers are also scared because of the content of what they teach sometimes, and the complete lack of help from their hierarchy, from the Ministry of Education. So we have a lot of teachers who are trying to leave. It's becoming a Western society issue, not just a British or English issue.
Yeah, I mean, my only comparison is Australia. It's been a long time, but I would say that most Australian teachers I come across are shocked at the amount of paperwork we do in England. There just isn't. And if anybody is from Australia can correct me and say, no, that's changed. But I mean, this is just recently, is that teachers I meet who have come from Australia just say this country's bonkers. Like, it is insane how much paperwork schools in England do. And they are shocked. They just cannot believe it. And I've just got, I mean, like I said, I'm at a pretty good place. I've been there 18 years. So obviously I like it. And I did move jobs. I wasn't someone who would just stay in teaching for the hell of it. But I don't know why it seemingly seems an English disease, is like keeping paperwork. And supposedly it's got better. And I know with primary schools, it's absolutely bonkers, the amount of tracking they have to do. And I don't understand why schools persist with it in such sort of inept ways. I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts, Liz?
Sorry, I'd muted myself. I am a core subject teacher, so those statistics in terms of it being felt so heavily by core subject teachers, I do understand that. I do think we are in danger of suggesting that core subject teachers perhaps do have a heavier workload, because I think outside of core subjects like PE, the humanities subjects, drama, music, I think they do have a huge workload in other ways as well. So we might have a physically, in terms of like the paperwork side of it, might be a little bit heavier. So I think it's hard to kind of compare, if I'm being really fair about it, even though I kind of sit in my misery with my marking about how much there is to do. I think pastorally, the demands have increased significantly, and I think that accounts for a huge amount of our workload and the burnout that we feel. I think as other services have been cut, more has been expected of teachers to kind of pick up the slack on that, and as need has increased, the teachers are the ones filling those gaps where those needs still need to be met. We can't just ignore them, and so therefore it's teachers who are doing that. And all these kind of things in society where you've got children coming to school hungry, or the mental health crisis that we have, and CAMS has got a 6-year waiting list or whatever it is, all these things, we can't just let children suffer, because we are compassionate people and it is our responsibility as well. And so we fill that gap, but all of that comes at a bit of a price in terms of our own well-being, and our workloads. And we wouldn't do it any other way, I don't think. And it's funny, look, what you said about primary school teachers as well. I think what they do at primary schools, I don't think I fully understood that really until my son started school. And I saw he used to have, when he was in year R, there was an app where they would upload all of the activities that they did.
Yeah, my daughter had the same thing, yeah.
As a parent, that was absolutely glorious. I loved it. I loved having pictures of what he was doing and records of what he was doing. But the teacher part of me went, whoa, like that's a huge responsibility for teachers, having to feel like they need to record that. And I'm called into my son's school. They do like these open afternoons where you go in and you can look at all the children's books. He's now in year 1 and there's marking in his book. And I'm like, who's that for?
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's for him.
Yeah.
Like, is it for me as his parent? Is it for management to look like who's really gaining something from that process? It's creating a lot of work for actually not really any gain. And like photographs of him doing things, again, as parent, absolutely love seeing him do his maths activities. I love it. But is it making a difference massively to his progress? Probably not. In which case, why is it being done? And I think that's the problem. It's the why. We lose sight of the why. Why are we doing these things?
Yeah, and I think good centres, really hone in on that. And I think, schools with good retention, it's workload. That's why there's very little movement at where I work, because they do sort of think of the why. Look, I teach older students and it also makes things easier. But I think the days where maybe that stereotype was, primary school teaching will be easier because you just go in and you play with the kids. And then I actually saw what primary school teachers, not that I thought that, I've got to say, but when I actually saw what primary school teachers do in terms of paperwork to track, to, show incredible amounts of stats of reading ability at a certain age, which student is one on these pathway sort of booklets they had, I just couldn't believe it, and that is a government requirement. I don't know if it's got better under this government, and this whole idea about, by the time they reach 7, they're, what do they call it? They're like flow pathway or whatever, and where exactly they are with reading and maths. Now, we'd want teachers to be aware of that, of course, but I just, it seemed they just spent all of their time outside of teaching, planning lessons, and just keeping reams and reams of statistics on large classes. Obviously, they're large classes. And, it's like, well, surely there's a better way of doing it, and I don't actually have the stats there. I've realized for primary school, but I don't know how high they are. But one of the things that just interested me when you were talking, Lucy, is I do think what I have, and I don't know if there's any statistics to back that up, but I have noticed that the people sometimes who struggle the most are people that come from industry. So one gentleman I know, like years ago, I was helping at teacher training at a university near me, and I met this guy who had worked in top business. He'd been an accountant and an economist before he went into teaching, and he said to me, I'm going to have no problems teaching. Teaching will be like stress. He said stress is handling $1 billion account when the client, is on your back and you're working till 2 a.m. And I didn't say anything. And then, of course, I saw him a year later, and he was, was just like, this is nuts. And he just couldn't believe it. It's like, it's a different, what he hadn't realized, and we're having a go at the guy, like, I can see where you come to this, is it's a different type of stress. Also, if you're working on $1 billion account, I've always thought he was at quite a difficult school for his first year. If you're on $1 billion account and you say to someone, I need this on my desk by this time, and they say, F off, you'd fire them. So what he found really difficult is going into a class and saying, I want you to do this. And some kids are like, no, I'm not doing that. And that was the stress he had. He just couldn't, and he had a real difficulty. And he didn't leave teaching, thankfully, but he did. He really, I guess what was sad about his situation was he really wanted to work at a more difficult area in a more difficult place. And he lasted a year, and he went to an all-girls grammar school. And as far as I know, he's still there. And when I saw it, he loved it. But that he really had this dedication of working in a more difficult area. And he just said it was like nothing else. He said, no, it doesn't compare. And I wonder if, my wife works in teacher training, and she sort of anecdotally said that it can be people who've worked in industry who are like, I've got this, like that, look at my job. It's super. I work for Microsoft or whatever. And then they just like cannot believe the type of stress that, and a lot of them will just go back to industry, or like him, they might stay, but they sort of his dream of being like, really dedicated to a more difficult area. He said, no, it just wasn't feasible. So I don't know. I don't think it's teacher. I don't know what you guys think, but I don't think teacher training places are being unrealistic. I think they are very realistic in what they tell teachers about what the job entails. I don't think it would be a case of, oh, well, we're sort of hiding the truth of it. So I just think it's hard for people to really understand until they're in it. My God, this is tough. I'm not sure if, what you guys think, if teacher training could be, set them up even more. I don't know. What do you think, Lucy?
Oh, let Maud come in, because she had her hand up.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
I'm using
I'm just reading a
hand
comment here
signal.
from one of our listeners as well.
I think you nailed it when you mentioned, you didn't say the word, but it was implied. It's responsibility, isn't it? Because as you said, if someone is not doing their work, you can fire them sometimes. Yeah. But the pupils are not doing their work. And then you have someone above you saying, oh, your results are not good enough. We might get rid of your subject, or you might not get a pay rise because your pupils are not attaining a grade 6 or a grade 7 or whatever grade. So I think it's because the responsibility is on the teacher's shoulders. And I think that's what shocked me the most when I first came to the UK 20 years ago, when I saw how much work the teachers were doing compared to in France. Because in France, you have a teacher coming in the classroom, they deliver a lesson. Of course, they do all the marking and the register and everything. But if you fail, it's the people's fault.
It's the same in Italy.
Yeah. Whereas in England, I was really surprised because the teachers were told, oh, so and so didn't do so well. Did you provide them with extra help? Did you call the parents to tell them that the child is not? And I was thinking, well, that's not a teacher's job. I'm sorry. If a child is not doing their work, it's also because they're, sometimes the child needs to open their books and do some revision. But in this country, I noticed the blame is on the teachers. The onus is on the teacher. And I think this is what is really difficult to manage, because sometimes you will find pupils who will not open their books, parents who will not answer the phone, and children who will not come to intervention. And you're still blamed for it, and you have the responsibility. I have another example of a colleague. He was brilliant at his job. He was in pastoral, so in a sixth form, and he would deal with children's personal, we know what pastoral do. So when there's an issue at home, they deal with it, they help the child go through it, etc. And this person used to be a police officer. So you would think, oh, he's going to be amazing because he knows all about, dealing with people in a mental health crisis, because a lot of police work is dealing with people at breaking points. And he lasted a year and a half. He was brilliant at his job, and then he said, I'm going back to the police force, because he said he felt like he didn't have enough leeway to really help. We are, and I think so that was the word responsibility, and there's also rigidity. Workload, for instance, I know I don't have as much marking because my pupils write in French, so they are not going to write that much comparatively to English. I know RE, history, English, they have so much marking. Sometimes my colleague has a mini suitcase, and she looks like she's going on a holiday, but she's not. She's taking 200 copies to mark. And we went to the CEO of our trust, and we said, workload is too much. We have assessments every term. It's just too much. We don't have time to moderate. We don't have time to discuss how to improve marking, to give proper feedback. And we said, could we have once a year, maybe in mid-year, a Google form or type? So it would be marked automatically. So it would be multiple questions, multiple answer questions. And the answer we got, this is what the role of teaching is. This is about marking in your weekend. This is just the way it is. So a complete, we hit a wall, and we were saying, we do a lot more things than 30 years ago. You still want us to work at full capacity. Something's going to break, and it's going to be, provision, the quality of provision. So I think once we get SLT who actually listens, we will see improvement.
I think you're totally right. I think with marking, I think there have been some big changes. Like, I can honestly say from my center, in terms of marking essays for history, there's been huge improvements made, particularly coming out of research at the IOE, that do make a difference. I think a lot of bookmarking and, color coding lessons that people used to have to do have gone. And I think there have been improvements in certain areas. But what I would say is, I don't feel that that's completely freed up. It's almost like you do that, but it's replaced with something else. So now that we're doing less marking, I feel like, I got to fill it with something else. I don't know if that's just me or that's a habit of teachers, but I think teachers can be very good at lowering one thing and going, I found a better way to mark, right? Where I don't mark every essay, every word. Like, I would say that has made a huge difference. But then at the same time, I've just seemingly filled it with something else. But I don't know if that's just me or that's what teachers do. But it is an issue.
We're not good at guilt-free leisure time.
No, 100%.
Really like it's just something that you always feel like you should be doing something. And I've felt that over half term. Like, I feel really strongly about preserving my time with my son and making sure that he gets me in the holidays, but all the time that I'm doing things with him, I'm thinking, I probably should be doing that, and I've got that to do, I'll have to do that. Your mind is thinking. And so if you ever cut anything out and you think, I've become more efficient at that, you do fill it with something else. You're like, maybe I'll offer that extracurricular activity, or I could do this now, instead of going, actually, this is the end.
Well, look, can I just come in? Just because I wanted to tell you about the show's partners. So this show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit www.hachetteLearning.com to explore the full range of titles. And I just wanted to say about, I thought that Maud made a really, really good point about the responsibility side of things. So I left school in 1989. I did okay, but I didn't match my potential, but for far. But the teachers would say things. I was told, you'll be lucky if you get an E. You wouldn't dream of saying that now. And I'm not saying that was a good thing to say, but what I'm saying is they were comfortable saying that and probably hoping that they'd be right. Well, I got a B actually for history, so just so you know. But there was a feeling of, well, it's up to you. It's up to you. And that has all gone. And then that drives the data. I mean, for example, in maths, we would have the end of year exams or the mock GCSE papers. So they sit this paper, it's an hour and a half paper, around 30 questions or so. And each question might be 1A, 1B, 1C, that kind of thing, question 2, question 3A, and all of these things. And we would have to go through with our entire pile of marked questions and enter the marks for each question onto a spreadsheet. So question 1A, you got 1 mark. Question, so that you could see it would go green if they got all the marks available for the question, amber if they got half or part of the marks, and red if they didn't get any of the marks for that. And you imagine that for some people, if you had 2 classes of 30, that was 60 times that you were having to type in. And of course, by the end of the spreadsheet, it doesn't add up to the number that you have on the paper, and then you've got to go back through it again. And that kind of thing is useful information. It does tell you something, but it doesn't make us particularly more able to improve on those scores. So it's something that you could give to the student and say, this is how you did, but they already know. And if they're not, you know, so it was, again, like Liz said, who is it benefiting? It was benefiting our data, information. It did help us to identify where intervention was needed in a numerical way, but actually you could identify where intervention was needed by looking around your classroom and seeing who was trying and struggling, who was struggling because they weren't trying, and surprise, surprise, most of the kids who were not trying and therefore you didn't know if they were struggling were the ones on the intervention list. And did they come to intervention? No, they went to PE, or they went. Do you see what I mean? And so you were on hiding to nothing.
I think those things are, I mean, I could be very badly corrected, but I do think those things have improved. I think there is a balance. I agree with what you're saying, Maud. I totally agree that responsibility, I don't necessarily think it's totally a bad thing. I mean, I work a lot in Italy, and I would say that attitude of, well, it's a student's fault. I think Italy, just in the places I've seen, go too far with that. You know, there's just no response. Like, and maybe we go too far the other way.
Yeah.
But I was pretty shocked at some of the attitude of that sort of one, which was, it's a student's fault. You know, they're just not learning. It's not me. I'm not going to adapt my teaching, whatever. And yeah, a lot of teachers, there's no doubt that the teach life balance in Italy is better than England's. But I thought, well, yeah, because you're not putting in enough. But I don't know if that's what is ingrained in us. Like, I think it's a very difficult thing. I think also there's been a big movement to this idea of relational practice. Now, relational practice is, I guess, we should know all the students as individuals, and this allows us to teach better, to understand them, to set barriers, but, you know, in a way, shape our teaching at an individual level. Now, there's lots of evidence that is good practice. It does come at a cost. You know, you think about knowing students and you go home and like, you know, there's been a lot of studies written on this. There's a lot of research on student well-being. There's not that much research on how that has impacted teachers. And I think it's more and more people are starting to realize that it's all well and good to talk about this relational practice. And I am overall a believer in it, but it carries a lot of weight. You know, if you're going to teach like that, you know, you teach so many students and you're at that individual level, like you said, more where you're like, well, you should have known about this student and you should have done this or whatever. And I think teachers can internalize it. And it's, my personal feeling is you can minimize the stuff you're talking about, Lucy, but I don't know yet if people have really sort of thought about this idea about what teaching is and how to know the students and the burden that leaves on teachers. It's very hard to go home and just completely switch off when you're continuously got this idea about this individual. What have I done here? Maybe I missed this student out. Oh, I got 30. Oh God, that student maybe sat in the lesson. It's like, oh, every student has to be learning in the lesson. Did they learn in every lesson? I had that one student, I think they weren't paying attention. Maybe they're on their phone. Oh God, like maybe this is just me, but I think what I'm talking about, a lot of teachers feel, and it's intense, you know.
And it is really intense. And I think it is really difficult. And kind of circling back to what you were saying about people coming in from other professions, I think you have to live it to understand how that feels, because it is exhausting. Like you will have a period at the end of the day where you have to decompress because you have dealt with so much in a day. So, you know, you have a 45 to 50 minute lesson, you have 32 kids in that class. who are all placing demands on you, asking you different things. You've got the kid in the corner who's like, who has their hand up but is going miss, 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 miss until you give them attention. You've got that kid over there who's hitting the other kid over the head with a pen. You know, you're also trying to teach and impart knowledge and get them to there's all these things going on. There's a statistic, isn't there, that I don't know, it's just like law, but teachers make more minute-to-minute decisions than brain surgeons because you're dealing with so many people at the same time. And when you're on, I know at primary it's slightly different because you've got the same set of children, but on a 50-minute rotation, when you're dealing with then 32 new personalities, the next 50 minutes with that relational practice where you're like, right, that child needs that child needs that. Oh, I must remember to tell that person that. Then an email's popped in. Can you ask this person to see me at the end of the day? Someone comes in the door with a piece of paper and is like, can you pass this to this person? Somebody else, can I just speak to this person? And there's all this going on all the time. And meanwhile, you're still trying to get them through these hoops and get them to pass these exams. And that does take its toll. And it's not that anybody doesn't want to do that. I think the problem is that we do want to do all of those things and we do want to be that for all of those people and we want to do the best possible job that we can. One of the comments that I put up earlier is about we are perfectionists. We do want to do things well by our very nature, but that takes its toll. You can feel absolutely exhausted. You know, by lunchtime, if you've taught 4 periods, by lunchtime, you can feel completely drained before you hit that afternoon. And it's not, you can drink as much caffeine as you want. There's not enough in the world to power you through that. But people show up and they do the best that they can. But then you're criticized for it as well.
Yeah,
you're
I
like,
think
you're not doing well enough, and it's like, oh my gosh, I tried so hard.
I mean, I think it's an interesting. I obviously think it's an interesting profession because it's been my profession. But I do compare it to friends who have left teaching, who have jobs where you say to, like, what do you think of it? You know, do you like your job? And they're like, yeah, it's all right. I get up, I do it. You know, I don't know many teachers like that. I've taught in places where teaching is like the worst thing. Like I was at a very difficult school in Australia where I would wake up in the morning and just think, oh God. And then weekends were horrible. The end of, holidays were horrible. And I knew I had to get out. The job I have now is, I've been doing it for 18 years. I love it. But teaching can be, I don't know many teachers when you say, what's it like, who are just like, I get up, I do it, I go home. It's a living, like teaching just isn't like that. And I also worry about being very hypocritical. Sometimes when we do shows like this, I do worry a little bit in that if someone was to watch this, who's not a teacher, think, oh God, I do want to say, look, it can be the most rewarding profession. It can be incredible, but it has incredible highs and incredible lows. And I don't know. I mean, I wrote down here on my notes, would pay make a difference? I mean, I would like to get paid more, but I'm not. I don't ever think pay is the complete answer. I don't think someone facing, but like if someone had come along to me in the job I had in Australia and said, don't worry, Dave, we'll pay you more, I still would have left. Like it just wasn't feasible to be doing that. Now that was a behavior issue aspect, but in a difficult area. But I don't know what people think if pay progression would make a difference.
I genuinely think it's time. I just think, and the thing is, I think a lot of teachers are saying like, obviously we want pay that keeps track with inflation.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying no to pay rises.
But we also like giving us more money if it's not in line with inflation. If it's just this idea of let's throw money at the problem, I genuinely would rather have time. I would rather have time because I want to be able to do my job well. And I think a lot of us feel that, like, to feel less stressed doing our job. We've just had a comment that says, don't forget getting paid for working 32.5 hours, but working 60 hours. I think being able to do your job adequately is what we want to be able to do. And I actually don't think money's the solution. What I do think is interesting, though, about teaching, unlike other jobs in private industry, there's a lot of room for promotion in private industry and being rewarded for doing well at your job, whereas in teaching you don't get bonuses, there's no reward for being really good at your job, and there's a ceiling on it as well. And it's like, if you want to earn more money, you have to take on reams more responsibility, and that's quite gutting as well. It's like, I'm already burnt out and I do want more, but I also don't have the capacity. That's me.
But there are loads of teachers,
but I can't take it on.
Who won't take that next step, who don't want to be head of year, they don't want to be head of department because they feel as though I'm just keeping my head above water now. I can't take on anymore, you know, and I saw lots of that as well, you know, teachers who are trapped in the profession as well. You know, I had a colleague who was desperate to do something different. She was very, very intelligent. She was thinking of, she wanted to work, we've got a nuclear power plant that's being built in Somerset, and she thought, I would love to be involved in that, but she would have to do an apprenticeship, and she'd never earn what she was earning teaching, and therefore she couldn't do it. And she said, I just feel trapped. And she was a brilliant teacher, absolutely brilliant teacher, still is, and you know, does enjoy the work, but it's hard, it's really hard. And if it's not what you really want to do, I think a lot of teachers are, like you say, Dave, the good moments are really good. But when you go home and you're taking that pile of work home, or you know that tomorrow you've got that, you know, that observation coming, or we've got Ofsted coming in at some point, and you have all the mock Ofsteds coming in and all the, you know, and is it worth it when, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the mock Ofsteds are, well, they're largely gone, although they've got these EQRs now. Is it worth it? I think it depends. Like, the stats are interesting. The dropout rate basically goes completely down after 5 years. So most teachers are leaving within 5 years.
Yeah.
After that, it does level out quite a lot, which does seem to indicate that if you can make it past the first 5 years, it's still intense. But maybe, as you were saying, maybe people feel more trapped. But you get better at dealing with things. But it is interesting, that statistic, that it is, when they're talking about this massive dropout rate, it is all within the first 5 years, which seems to indicate that people are leaving teacher training and just going into circumstances that they're just thinking, this is nuts. Like, maybe for the pay and the time and what they're having to do. Yet if they can stick it out for 5 years, there's a difference. I think also, we're talking about teachers. You were just saying about management. I think the dropout rate, well, not the dropout, the burnout rate for principals is insane. Like, the average they last is getting less and less. And I see, you know, principals in schools, and I just think, why would anybody, I mean, I know some of them could pay insane amounts of money, but I do think, why would anybody put themselves, like, it is not something, I'm always amazed when I meet people who are like, my dream is to become a principal. I'm like, really? Because it just seems to me to be the most intense and sort of crazy thing. I don't know, you know, we were talking about solutions before, and it was actually you, Liz, who pointed this out. I'd never heard of this group. And again, if anybody else has, that would be great, which is the UK Workload Reduction Task Force, which was set up in 2024, which is a surprise to me. And they put out a report on what they thought teachers shouldn't be doing. Reformatting or transferring data across multiple systems. Yeah, 100%. I mean, centres, that this seems to be such a disease within institutions in this country. Not worrying about formal minutes. Okay, this is an interesting one. Teachers should not be cataloguing, stock taking, ordering, or maintaining materials and equipment. That one, I was like, yeah, but who else is going to do it? Like, that would be great. But when my pens run out, or I don't have enough paper for my students, or I was a bit like, it seems to be done by people who are like, this is all great, but I'm not really sure. I don't know if I mean, I'm sure those of us who are teachers definitely maintain materials and equipment. I'd love to hear from teachers who are like, no, that's somebody else's job. I don't know about, how does it work where you teach, Maud?
Well, when we run out because we are not a core subject and our budget is tiny. And then we tell the kids, oh, you don't have a pen, but I don't have a pen either. So that's the way it is. No, I mean, what I disagreed with and what was said is the idea of time. I don't think it's time we need. I think it's more democratic principles in the way schools are run, because we have so much, demands coming down vertically upon us, and we never have a say in how we teach. And I think that's, we could deal with our time and our deadlines if we had less people telling us what to do all the time, whether it's the government, whether it's Ofsted, whether it's SLT, whether it's sometimes parents. I feel like everybody's got a say in how we work, and we don't. you know. So for
Mm,
instance, now we're
yeah.
told to use booklets, and we're given booklets, and they're not great most of the time because they're made by people who don't teach children. And then we're told, oh, we are not going to use slides, or we're going to use slides now. We ask for textbooks. Oh no, we don't use textbooks anymore. We are all going to go on Chromebooks. There's these decisions made from the top, constantly imposed on us. Oh, you need to use lollipop sticks from now on. Oh, you need to use colored cups. Did you remember the colored cups? Oh, you need to use the chili, green, orange. All these rules that are, I'm sure, are designed by people who are paid for that, but they're not helping us. And I would love for a year, just give me a year where I teach what I want to teach for my pupils so that it's tailored for them. And that's when, what you were saying, Dave, we need to know our pupils, because, if my pupils have never left the estate, and then I'm asking them, describe what you do on holiday, or describe a visit to the local park, they don't go to the local park. They stay on the estate. This is completely irrelevant to their experience. So if I know that, then I would organize maybe a trip somewhere to the seaside. Imagine that. And then they can talk about it in their French essays. So if I was just left alone in my classroom to devise the curriculum I need for my pupils, it might be very different if your pupils are in a grammar school, for instance. But more democracy, more democratic choices, and then I'll manage, because I'm good with organization and deadlines.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about, Maud, is autonomy, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I think it's so complex, because I would say, actually, where I work, I've got incredible amounts of autonomy. I'm very lucky, but workload is still. Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at a comment from Emma saying about workload involved in complaints, interactions with parents. I think good places, again, are very strict on that, and I do think that is an issue that schools are dealing with more and more.
With the rise in AI as well, because
there's been a lot of talk, hasn't there, about legal-ish letters being written by AI that parents will send in. Again, I think good places and good centres have got very strict rules on that. I saw earlier someone saying about comments about not massive report writing, but most schools I know have moved away from that. Again, I don't know if I'm in a really good area. Someone said about, that's something schools can do, and schools have done that. I mean, my feeling is that, like, I still come back to this idea that actually we probably do a little bit less paperwork and a lot less, I would say, formal marking, at least where I am. But it's just been replaced with other things. Like,
it's still dictated to. I mean, when we did reports for our students, you had 50 characters to write about one thing, then 70 to write about the next thing, and it was never enough because you didn't have enough to convey. So someone somewhere said, what will help them if they don't have to write so much for reports. But as Maud was saying, that autonomy to be able to say, I need to write more about this student. You didn't have that anymore. And I was really fortunate in that. I think that was one of the benefits in my role, was autonomy. For not all of the students I taught, but for many of the students that I taught, I was the last port of call for those students before, I don't know what, but I was the last port of call. So people were happy that I could keep the most difficult students in a classroom. If they took a pen to paper, that was an added bonus. And so I was able to shape lessons how I wanted to, and I ended up getting good results. And you hear about schools now, and it's generally when they have a poor Ofsted result, and then what comes out of that is you get put into a mat, and then the people at the top of the mat say, every lesson, this is what seems to happen from my sort of seeing what's happening around different schools, every lesson must be taught in the same way. So when they come in, they must have this to do. Then when you give them this much, they have this much work, you have to do your plenary, blah, blah, blah. And so it means that art, when a child goes to an art lesson, they then go to an English lesson and it's exactly the same. So you've lost that character, that your own way of teaching, your own way of inputting. On top of that, textbooks were a great thing because you didn't have to go and source all of the different things for teaching. If you could have textbooks and you could go, do you know what, I don't think this one actually tackles that in the way I want, so I'll look on the internet for something else. But the expectation to be constantly finding new resource platforms or platforms for home learning and things, you know, the school spending budget money on, you know, the latest maths platform that's going to help the students, and it will mark the students' homework, but actually it takes ages to set the homework properly and they can't get into it. And it's just, you know, just let teachers decide how they want to teach. So I'm with Maud all the way on that.
I think that's an interesting thing because, yeah, you're totally right. I've come across centres that do this. Interestingly enough, I was told that was meant to lower teacher workload. So I go into a school and I'm like, I don't actually. They're like, don't worry, we've got a set lesson plan. You've got to do it this way. You don't have to worry about that in your first year.
For you.
Yeah, and that was. I'm not in agreement with this. I think it's terrible, but I don't. I've seen schools and centres like that, and I've seen mats like that. But even places that don't do that still have. I agree with Lucy that this happens, and I think it's wrong because I think teachers should have more autonomy. But I don't see any indication that places that don't do that are seeing teachers, you know, having all this time. Like, that's where it comes back to. I mean, I'm just thinking, is it, I don't know, this is probably the wrong thing to say, but is it just an acceptance that, like, this is the job in some ways? It's an intense job. There's a lot to it. You want to be a good teacher, this is what you have to do. Everybody's shaking their heads at me, so like 100% no.
I think that is the attitude, but I don't think it should be.
It should.
I think quite often it's like it's a vocation. What do you expect? Like you've got to you have to roll with the punches. You know, sometimes you do have to invest a lot of time in these things, and it's like, okay, like, and we do it because education is a little bit like a cult, and you do kind of, it's like, okay, it's for the kids, it's for the kids, and you do have that inner mantra all the time. And Maud was saying earlier about trips and how, like, wanting to, you know, organize a trip, which years ago was a much more straightforward process, and we had many more trips running. That doesn't happen anymore because that's become an administrative nightmare to run a trip. And people don't do it because people don't have the time, because so many demands are being made of you elsewhere. But actually, those extracurricular things probably have the most impacts on our young people. They experience outside of the classroom. They experience things that perhaps if it wasn't run at school, they wouldn't be able to do at home. But school's providing that opportunity. But teachers can't do it because it's something that is on that list. It's on that task force list. The administration of trips shouldn't be done. Well, it is done by teachers. It is predominantly done by teachers. We do have admin teams, but ultimately most of it falls to the teachers.
But you know,
and teachers don't have that capacity.
If you, I mean, Dave, just want to very quickly tell you about Hachette Learning, that this show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Visit www.hachetteLearning.com to explore the full range of titles. But Dave, you said about the fact that it won't buy you more time, but you know, if you were planning the lesson you wanted to teach instead of the lesson you are being told you have to teach, you would enjoy that time that you were planning that lesson, because you would be crafting that was the expertise of teachers. That was once the prized thing of a good teacher, was that they exactly, and they knew their class. And you wouldn't teach if you had two top sets. Our school was so big, it was split into two sides, and so we had, you know, parallel set ones down to fives. If you had both top sets, you're still not teaching the same lesson to them, because there are different students with different needs. But everything is being made uniform and the same for all students. No wonder kids are bored at school. If every lesson they go to, they know exactly what's coming next.
Yeah, I'm just not sure. I mean, that is not the experience of where I work, and it's not the experience of the mat I work for. So maybe I'm in a very privileged position. That's all I'm saying, Lucy, is I have come across centres where I've said, because I work for certain organizations that are meant to help teachers, and I've talked to teachers about how they could improve their teaching, and they're saying, that's all well and good, but I'm not allowed to do it like that because I have to have this plenary, I have to have that. So I've come across centers like that, but I wouldn't say, again, I can be shouted down that's the majority in the area that I'm in, that I've seen. I actually, you know, and what I'm saying is that even where I work, where that is not the case, and I think I'm very privileged, in that sense. I don't think teachers would say, maybe we're better, but I don't think many of them would say, yeah, my work-life balance is awesome. Like, I work for this place and has done so much. And yet, so what I'm saying is it's very complex. Autonomy for teachers is clearly an issue. Like, I'm not disagreeing with that. But even in areas where you do have autonomy, like where I work, I wouldn't then say, yeah, teachers are like, my work-life balance is just unreal because I have autonomy. So I'm not sure that's the critical issue. That's all I'm saying. I think
it really
it's a
depends
very
where
hard thing. Yeah.
It really depends where you work. In my school, we've had new teachers starting in September, and they were gone in March already.
Yeah.
So, in my school's daughter, her form tutor has been there 25 years. So I do think the way teachers are treated is reflected in the retention. So now we need to look at these schools where teachers are running away mid-year, you know, and usually what they say is that they're treated like children. They're micromanaged, they're disrespected, they have no autonomy, they're told how to teach. And the problem is, this is just getting all the good teachers out, because good teachers are professionals, they're intrinsically motivated to make great lessons, and then they're put in a mold that is not fitting them at all. And I remember when Sir Keir Starmer came in and he said, oh, we've listened to teachers who say that their workload is too much, and we are going to explore AI to help them with preparing lessons. And I was like, how to find an issue and find the worst solution ever? Because I'm sorry, I like planning my lessons. I like to, for instance, I have Senegalese pupils. So I did a lesson on Senegal and some role models from Senegal and politicians from Senegal. That's what I love doing. Researching, finding nice visuals. I don't want AI to do that for me. I can use AI, but then when I direct it in a certain way. But this is not my issue. My issue is, don't make me do silly things all the time, moving files from PAMS to SIMS and then to Bromcom. We've changed software 3 times in a year and a half. You know, all this is making my workload unbearable. And I speak of experience. I've been teaching for 6 years, so I'm above that 5 years line. The first year I taught 4 days a week. Then for financial reason, I asked to teach five days a week. And from that time, I started, you know, when you're always rushing around and your room is too small and you have big desks. So I had blues all over my legs because I bumped into furniture. And then after a year, I had rashes and I would scratch. And my husband said, this needs to stop. This is going crazy. So then I chose to go part-time. And now I enjoy teaching because I teach only 2 days a week. And the 3 other days, it's a different world out there. I work from home. It's flexible. I get praised for the work I do. Can you imagine? I prepare PowerPoint. It can take me a week to do it. And then people say, oh, that was really good. Whereas in school, I do 5 PowerPoints a day and I'm treated like a child and I'm told you were late by 2 minutes for lineup. We are treated extremely badly. And I think I'm surprised there's still so many teachers employed, actually.
Well, I think it's because you can find a place. Like, the reason that I think I've been where I am for 18 years is because I don't have any of that. So I think if you find a place and there's not much movement from where I work. Having said that, I think
they're all coming
it's so
to your
hard.
School days.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so hard though. People still find the workload intense, and then it becomes that. Like, one of the things about being in a good place is if you don't know, if you've never taught anywhere else, it can be very difficult. And it doesn't. I do this sometimes where people might say about the workload and I'm like, my God, you've got no idea. You should go teach. And that doesn't help. Like, I don't think that's a good thing to tell teachers that either. But you're totally right. Like, you know, you could say to somebody, well, that's not the case everywhere. You know, we're actually very fortunate and people don't always see it that way. The workload at good places is, but I didn't want to mention the AI thing because it just makes me so angry. But yes, this idea that the AI revolution is going to come and solve all the workload problems just does my head in. I mean, I was thinking about it when we were doing this. I'm like, I don't even want to mention it because it's just so tiresome. This like round the corner. Don't worry. This all this workload will be solved. You'll just get AI and it'll do everything. I've heard this so many times. I'm like, well, let's see. But I'm so cynical about it. I think I don't. I mean, I think we can become ingrained in it. I realize even with myself sometimes I just want to be busy, and it's so hard as a teacher when you're doing it so intensely all the time. Even on weekends and holidays, you almost feel strangely guilty or almost like an adrenaline decline, and you feel like you should be doing something because you were. And like I said, my workload compared to stories like Maud was saying isn't that bad, but even with art myself, it's such a strange thing. And I just think teachers almost are ingrained into it. You want to do so well, and part of the burnout, I think, is it's almost like, I think, who said it, like a cult? I thought that was, yeah, it's almost like indoctrination. That was you, Les. Like, it is true. Like, I just get to a point where I don't switch off, and then I think, yeah, this is just a job. Like, well, this is what you do. And then you're like, is it? Like, I know when I said that before, you were sort of shaking your head more and saying, no, we shouldn't accept that that is just the job, you know. And so basically, I'm not a solution to it.
Yeah. I don't think we should accept it, but I think we are all kind of conditioned into this idea, because at the end of the day, we do work with young people, and it's not young people's fault that the system doesn't work. And so they're kind of victims of a system that they can do nothing about. I have this conversation with my classes all the time where they're like, you know, exams should be open book. Why are we having to learn all these things? And I'm like, guys, you are preaching to the converted on this. Like, I totally agree with you. The problem is, I can do nothing about it. I'm just working within a system that exists the way that it is. And all I am doing is trying to streamline it for you and make it as accessible as possible. That is what I want to do. And I feel like I'm better placed working within the system to try and do that than I would be out of it. That is my entire MO with my job is, I can't change the system. I'm sorry that I can't change the system, but I can make it better for you, and I will do whatever I can to make it better for you, because I do think that is how we're conditioned, and I stand by that as a way of working as well. Like, I feel really strongly that, because I always start the year by saying it will seem sometimes like I'm not on your side because I will be chasing you to do more or be better, but weirdly I am on your side, because that shows that I have high expectations of you, and I know that you're capable of more. Work with me, not against me. We are a team. You're going to feel like it. We're not sometimes, but I promise you, I am on your side, and I will always be on your side.
Yeah, it shows you care. You know, that's the thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's sometimes hard to switch off from that. Going to bring it to a close. What I do want to say to all our listeners and people watching, yeah, it is intense. There is a workload problem. I still want to assure people it can be a great job at times. And I do love teaching. I've done it for a long time. And I sometimes worry. But look, I would not say, there is no workload problem, but I do want people to understand it can be incredibly rewarding, despite, what is clearly
go in with your eyes wide open.
Yeah. Well,
if you go in knowing that there's a demand, you can find the joy, and you find joy in such small things in teaching as well. Like, just the simplest things make a massive difference, which I think when you explain it to people who work in other jobs, they're like, yeah, really? And you're like, no. Do you understand? I went home and cried because I was so delighted that I'd had that impact. And I don't think you get that with other jobs. You do get that with teaching.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think I've got anything else to add. That's a brilliant way of ending. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening today. And join us again next time.
Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.